400 years ago, the land of Gaza was under the rule of Hebrews, but some of their tribes turned their back to God when the Philistines came there. They found them weak and enslaves the Hebrews, but now they are hoping that a man will be born and will set these people free. In the present day, in Israel, the Philistines are seen worshipping in the temple and praying to their Lord. On the other hand, a Hebrew named Samson is trying to steal some bags of food from the temple with the help of his friend, but a soldier notices him and asks him about what he is doing here. He replies that he is just waiting for his master, who is praying in the temple. The soldier orders him to uncover his hood. One of the soldiers recognizes him and tells his fellow that he is Samson, a Hebrew strong man from the pits. Knowing this, the soldier orders Samson to surrender, but he jumps inside the temple and tries to escape with his friend. They started chasing them but are unable to catch them. Prince Rala, with their soldiers, is collecting tax from the people of Dan. They then announce that if they didn't get the required tax next time, then it would be double. They also brutally beat the civilians for not paying the required tax. When Samson returns, his father tells him that Tobias is killed by the Philistine commander and says that he has been chosen by God to serve his people. He further adds that he is not a normal Hebrew, and that he should think about who he is. In response, Samson replies that we just need peace. At night, Prince Rala informs the king that Samson is a strong Hebrew and the people believe in him to be their savior, but he believes that it is not more than a story. But the king says that we shouldn't ignore something that seems small and orders him to investigate about him. Samson and his brother are transporting some goods, when two men in a bad condition come, and say that the Philistines have brought a new fighter who is very strong and he is beating every Hebrew. He further says that only he could defeat him. Samson then arrives at the arena and challenges him into a fight. After getting some punches, he requests his God to give him strength and easily wins the fight. Prince Rala covered in a hood is also present in the crowd. Samson's father says that he is becoming arrogant, he only sees what's right in front of him. On the other hand, Rala catches the master along with his daughter and says that he will be under his service until his debt is paid and kills the fighter. Prince tells the king that the rumor is true, that Samson has some supernatural powers. The king says that you are inhabiting his kingdom. In response, the prince says whether Samson will serve the crown or he will die. Samson's brother tells him that he has found the girl that he previously asked him to find. Her name is Taryn and she is from Gaza, but they are the prisoners of Rala. Samson runs to meet her saying that he will set her free. He silently follows Taryn and says to her that he wants to know about her. At the same time, the bell rings, and Taryn had to leave, but Samson requests him to meet him tomorrow at the cliffs by the beach. On the other hand, the council says that Samson doesn't want to be judged and he is not suitable to lead the people. They further add that there is a slight chance that their own sister will be safe from his advances, but Samson's brother gives response them that your sister will not have her virtue if she wouldn't be protected by my brother. Samson and Taryn meet across the sea and Taryn tells Samson that my situation is not different from theirs and we both need freedom. On the other hand, the prince says to a girl named Delilah that his father thinks that he is not prepared for the crown and he orders him to deal with those little Hebrews, but according to him he should be leading armies to Egypt and other kingdoms. In response, Delilah says that king deserves more respect and honor, making the prince angry, and he warns her that if she wants to serve him as a queen then she should learn to hold her tongue. Samson asks Taryn to marry him, and she happily accepts his proposal. When Samson comes back home and tells his parents that he wants to marry a girl, he also tells them that she's from Timnah, putting an objection to his request that she is the daughter of the enemy. If he marries her, he will bring dishonor to his tribe. Taryn is singing a love song when Delilah comes in and says her to stop singing and asks the reason for being this happy. Taryn replies that my love is a Hebrew and he is respected among his community. In response, Delilah says that she is the servant of Prince Rala and that he will not give her servant to a Hebrew, but she also tells her that he will talk to Prince on her behalf. The prince and his soldier named Ashdod are talking about Samson when Delilah tells Prince that Hebrew has eyes on her new servant girl and that he wants to marry her. Delilah says to give Samson the girl and he will never raise his hands against him and will be in his service instead. They then decided to get them both married and also they will host the marriage ceremony. During the wedding, the prince asks Samson about his strength and challenges him with a riddle, but Samson loses it. In response, Samson gives a challenge to all 30 men present there, to solve his one riddle, and if he fails he has to give all of these men tunics to his people. The prince agrees, but if he gives the right answer, Samson has to do the same. He then tells the riddle and gives them time till morning to answer it. The prince asks Taryn about the riddle's answer, but she says that she doesn't know. When Samson meets Taryn, she asks Samson about the answer and says that we are getting married, so there will be no secret among us. In response, Samson says what is sweeter than honey and what is stronger than a lion. Delilah secretly hears all the conversation between them. The next morning, Samson comes to get his answer. Surprisingly, the prince gives him the correct one, and says him to bring the tunics for all 30 men. Samson says that he doesn't have them, but he will surely collect them and will bring them to him on time. Then he reaches a well, where he starts drinking the water. Suddenly a Philistine soldier sees him and stops him from drinking the water, as he believes that this pure water is not for Hebrews. Samson says that he needs all of their tunics. Hearing this, the Philistine soldier gets angry and attacks him. He punches the soldier so hard that he died. Then all the soldiers attack him and he kills all of them one by one. He then collects all the tunics and brings them to the prince, saying that my debt is paid now, and demands to give his wife back. The prince, however, says that she is not his wife as the marriage was not completed. He further says he has killed my soldiers, so he has to live the rest of his life working in the mines. Hearing this, Samson runs and the soldiers start chasing him. He then burns down the land of Rala with fire and demands to give Taran back, or he will burn all of his crops. Not caring much about his crops, the prince throws Taran and his father into the fire, eventually killing them. The next morning, the prince along with his soldiers comes to the tribe of Dan to arrest Samson, but Samson's father says that he is not there, so the prince orders to arrest his father and announces that if Samson wouldn't show off, he will find himself without father and the people will find themselves without a village. Hearing this, Samson's brother runs to meet him and says to him that it is the time when he can protect his people and bring the peace. Samson then surrenders himself to the prince for the safety of his village, but the prince kills his father in front of him and says that his village will also be burned down. Seeing this, Samson gets angry and started fighting with his soldiers. He again says his God to give him strength and kills hundreds of soldiers bravely. Later, Rala tells the king that Samson has the strength of a god and defeating him is impossible. The king gets angry and says that if they have seen him bleeding, then he is not a god, and that your eyes has deceived you. The prince says to Delilah, that he has witnessed a god and a real man and that he will take Samson's power from him. Thus, the king didn't send his army against the Hebrews, and the prince was sent for leading campaigns in Egypt. Years later, the trouble starts again as Rala returns. Samson's little brother says that their share of the coming harvest is not enough to feed them, so they should gather other tribes and prepare for the war, but Samson disagrees and says that our hope is only in peace. He then says that he will go to the king and demand for more share in the harvesting crops, with peace. Samson then arrives before the king and demands them to reduce their taxes and provide them with the harvest they deserve. The king asks him that what will he offer for this negotiation. In return, Samson says true peace between our people, otherwise he will face the wrath of God. Hearing this, the king rejects the offer, and told him that choosing war is not in your interest, so disappear and harvest will be provided to your people, otherwise see them suffer and get flourished. Samson gives a message to his brothers that he will return after changing the king's heart. At night, Delilah enters Samson's room and tells him that he is in big danger, but Samson doesn't believe her because she was with Rala. Delilah clarifies him that she was with Rala, until she knew his real intention. At the same time, the proprietor enters and orders to kill both of them. Samson starts running along with Delilah. While running, he tells Delilah that he can't go back as a failure, so she says that she has a house in the valley of Sork. Samson asks her to stay here because they are not after her, and he runs alone. The people gather around him and say to kill this beast. Samson feels helpless and prays to God to give him his strength so that he can show them the power of living God. He then breaks the giant door of the castle and becomes successful in escaping. The next morning, Delilah finds Samson in the forest and she took him to her valley house. When Samson awakes, she tells him that he was sleeping for 2 days. Samson then thanked her and left, saying that he owes her his life. He then meets his mother and says her to pray for him. Samson's brother comes to him and says that he has forgotten his sacred vows, but Samson replies that this is not of your concerns and that he has tried but failed many times, and now he is done with failing. He also refuses to lead them on a dangerous path like this. Rala asks Delilah what good has come from her time with Samson. She replies that his loyalty only seems to be his weakness and he's not out to destroy us but only to those who hold him. 2 Hebrews tell the king that a group of men has been hiding weapons in my village. The king appreciates their information but killed them both. On the other hand, Delilah asks Samson what is this power that God has given to him. Samson tells her that 3 vows have been bestowed upon him and that he has broken 2 of them, and now if he cut his hair, he is afraid that he will lose his power. As Samson falls asleep, Delilah cuts his hair and at the same time, Rala attacks him with his soldiers and puts both Samson and his brother in the prison. Later Rala goes to meet him and says that he is not here to kill him and that he just wants to know how he gets his power. Samson refuses to tell and says that he deserves this punishment. Seeing this, his brother says he will tell him, and says that just fear the living God and humble yourself. The king gets angry and says to just kill Samson and bring his head to him. Prince replies that now everyone has learned that we have defeated the great Samson, and that people will fear them more than ever. But the king does not get satisfied and says that you have learned nothing. Surprisingly, the prince kills his king and takes his crown. On the other hand, Samson says to his brother that he was right, and that we must have a war with them. He then asks him to get prepared for the war, but his brother says how could they do this without God's help? Samson says to just keep their faith in God. Rala announces that he is now the mighty king, who has subjugated the strongest man with the power of Dagon and orders to bring the prisoner. Samson is then brought out and everyone wants him to be killed. Rala then orders to string him up and beats him to death. Samson requests God to give him his power for one last time. Suddenly, thunder strikes, and with the help of God, Samson demolishes the castle, with the strength of his hands, killing everyone inside the castle including himself. Now all the Hebrews are preparing for the fight to get free from the Philistine tyrant, praising that God is with us. Many battles were yet to be fought over the promised land. The Philistines sent their armies, but the tribes of Israel had awakened and they knew that no force could stand against them because God has again enlightened them with a shepherd boy named David, who stepped into the battlefield, and the time had come when God has chosen the long-last Hebrew king.